Hi everyone. I'm really sorry that I had to re-upload this. I'm not really sure what happened last night, but it's fixed now, so let's get started. So if you remember when we left off, we were talking about the formation of stars and our sun and the formation of our universe, and now we're going to dive into our home, the solar system. So there is an organization called the International Astronomical Union. They have a specific way of classifying planets. So number one, you have to be big enough to create a spherical shape or a round shape due to your own gravity. So you have to be big enough to have a gravitational force that forces you to be round. You have to orbit around a star. Um, and you can't be a star or a satellite of another planet. So, for example, our moon orbits Earth, which also is orbiting the sun. So theoretically, our moon is going around the sun as well, right? The moon is already a moon. It cannot be a planet, right? Even though it is orbiting the sun, because it's already orbiting Earth, it can't be a planet. It already has a job. It's a moon. And the last criteria is that it has to clear the neighborhood around its orbit. Um, the thing about Pluto is that it violates number 3, right? So we'll get into that in a couple slides, but for now, those are the 3 criteria for being a planet. So Pluto is now a dwarf planet, which I'm pretty sure most of us know. And this means that there are 2 other classified planets or objects. They're called Ceres and Eris. They used to be classified as planets or possible planets, and now they're classified as dwarf planets. So this is our sun, and the planets orbit around the sun in an anti-clockwise direction. So here's Earth zooming around, right? How cute. So now we're going to explore all of the planets in the order, starting from the one that's closest to the sun. And that planet is Mercury. It is the smallest planet in our solar system. Um, all of the planets, for the most part, were named after Roman gods. So this one was named after the Roman messenger god. It orbits the sun once every 88 days, meaning it is the fastest planet. Um, or rather, it just has the shortest rotation or length, right? It does not have any moons or rings. The temperatures vary and it doesn't have an atmosphere, so it loses and gains heat rather quickly, but it can't keep it. It can be 427 degrees Celsius in the daytime and as low as negative 280 degrees Celsius at night. So super, super hot, going to super, super cold. It's a terrestrial planet, as are all of the inner planets. So everything between the sun and the asteroid belt are the inner planets, and they're all rocky. Everything outside of that are gas giants. Mercury has a lot of landmark features similar to Earth, like plains, volcanoes, and then large sheets of ice, which is kind of weird since it's so close to the sun. But remember, it does get super cold at night. So that is kind of expected. It's getting well below 0. Venus is our sister planet. It's very similar in size and mass. However, Venus is by far the hottest planet, even though it's not the closest to the sun. Venus has a dense, thick atmosphere that is 96% carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid, which make for a really, really caustic and terrible environment. Nothing can live there. The atmosphere is so dense and thick that it just traps all the heat that comes to it from the sun, which is called the greenhouse effect. And this is kind of like a runaway greenhouse effect because none of that heat is escaping, and it can never really get too cold. It's always just basically on fire, essentially. It's mostly covered by volcanoes. It's also a terrestrial planet, and it's not really well known, but the temperature they say is likely around 427 degrees Celsius. So again, super, super hot. And then our beautiful home Earth, it's the only known planet that supports life. It has an atmosphere and a crust. It's the only planet with liquid water. Its nickname is the Blue Marble, and it has one moon. Her name is Luna. And Earth has no rings. Scientists estimate Earth to be about 4.5 billion years old. So remember when we talked about the Big Bang theory before we went on spring break? If you want to review, I can link you a video to that if you need. Mars is the red planet. Due to all the iron that's currently in the surface, that's kind of what makes it have that rusty red appearance. It has a very thin atmosphere and a crust similar to Earth. We also have a lot of iron in our crust. It does contain polar ice caps, volcanoes, deserts, and valleys. It has a lot of craters. It has 2 moons, but it doesn't have any rings. It's really not known if Mars is ever going to or has ever been able to support life, but hopefully there will be new developments in the future. And it is the final planet before the asteroid belt. So the asteroid belt separates Mars and Jupiter. It separates the inner planets from the outer planets. It's a collection of space debris, asteroids, and chunks of ice. Sometimes these chunks are big enough to be considered dwarf planets, such as Ceres and Eris, like we talked about earlier, but Eris is in the Kuiper Belt, which we'll get to. Unlike the picture, this is a cute little artist rendering, but it's not accurate. So unlike this picture, the asteroid belt is mostly empty space. They're not as clumped together as you see kind of in this ring right here. There's hundreds of thousands of asteroids that are known, and then they're kind of kept in this belt region due to the gravity of Mars and the gravity of Jupiter kind of like forcing them to be in that region. They can't really escape. And then they orbit the sun as well. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It's also the largest of the gas giants. Sometimes you'll see the gas giants referred to as Jovian planets. So these planets don't have any surface, and it's mostly an extremely toxic and poisonous atmosphere. Jupiter has faint rings, 67 moons, and was named after the Roman god Jupiter. So if we were more well versed in Greek mythology, this would be the equivalent of Zeus. And the atmospheric pressure on Jupiter is 10 times greater than Earth, so it is absolutely not possible for life to exist on Jupiter. A fun fact, Jupiter has a 400-year-old hurricane that is violently still active. It is called the Great Red Spot, and you can see it in this picture. Saturn is the ringed planet. It's about 9 times the diameter of Earth, and it is also a Jovian gas giant. It has unique rings that are 20 meters thick, and mostly they're made of ice. There are thought to be hurricane-like storms on the north and south poles of Saturn that are found to have like a hexagon shape as opposed to a circle or a more round appearance, which is kind of interesting. There are 62 moons in its orbit, the largest which is Titan. Remember though, Titan in this case is a moon. We're not talking about Titan from where Thanos is from. And there are probably more than 150 moonlets or different objects floating around with Saturn. Uranus was named after the Greek god of the sky, Uranus, and it's the coldest planet in the solar system. It gets to an average of negative 224 degrees Celsius. This is unlike Mercury because Mercury can get really, really hot and then really, really cold. Uranus always stays cold. It has poisonous ices and gets this blue appearance from all the methane and ammonia and water that are present in its atmosphere. It's tilted sideways and has some little bit of a ring system. We know of 13 of them. And then there are 27 known moons or moonlets. Moonlets are just like smaller rocks that get captured, and they're smaller than a regular moon. Or usually they get, they don't really stay for the long ride. Neptune is the most dense of the gas giants. It also is made up of high amounts of methane, which is why it has a blue appearance. It has a ring that is made of ice chunks. There are 14 moons. And it also has a great dark spot similar to Jupiter, just not as big. The weather on Neptune is extreme, and the winds can get up to 2,200 kilometers per hour. It is the furthest planet from the sun and is the last planet before the Kuiper Belt. So right here, I'm going to kind of switch gears because I don't have a slide for Pluto, but we are going to talk about it when we talk about the Kuiper Belt because that is technically where Pluto is located. Okay, so this region is the Kuiper Belt. It's very similar to the Asteroid Belt, but it's on the outskirts of our solar system. It is much larger, much denser, and more jam-packed with rocks and chunks of metal and asteroids and chunks of ice. Sometimes we call these particular pieces dwarf planets, which is kind of where Pluto is right now. If you look here, here's Neptune, here's Pluto, and down here is one part where it crosses the orbit, and up here is another part. So I circled where it crosses the orbit. That is why Pluto is no longer considered to be a planet, because every 220 years or so, it decides it wants to be the 8th planet from the sun instead of the 9th planet. I say planet loosely in this case. It wants to make itself a planet. Think of it like a self-promotion, and it's really not. But it crosses Neptune's orbit, meaning it doesn't have a clear enough path to be considered a planet. A planet has its own path laid out, and Pluto just doesn't have that. That lasts for about 20 years, and then it, goes back in its lane, and another 220 years goes by. So we say Pluto lives in the Kuiper Belt, and then there's this region called the Kuiper Cliff, which is the point beyond where few objects are known. So that's this black empty space all out in here. That is the end of this presentation. I am so sorry that the sound did not work the first time. Hopefully this will be better. Stay tuned. I will be probably uploading a few more lectures just so we can hit all of our standards and be done. And then we'll be starting a project next week. So stay tuned. Please reach out if you need anything. And thanks for watching.